Expand our imagination.
Justification for being what you are.
Welcome to Washington Unplugged. I'm Jan Crawford. In an interview on Fox News last night, Sarah Palin lashed out at criticism she received in the wake of the tragic shooting in Tucson. Now, these were the first comments Palin's made since she released a video. In that video, of course, she called connecting her politics to the shooting a blood libel. Let's take a look at Sean Hannity's interview with the former Alaska governor to start things off.
Me, and this isn't about me, and my response 4 days after this horrendous event. And in my response, I talked about defending those who were innocent, had nothing to do with the shooting, and my defense wasn't self-defense, it was defending those who were falsely accused. I found out right away because...
Now, joining me to discuss this interview last night's conservative commentator Amy Holmes. Of course, she's co-host of America's Morning News. And for Politico, we've got Andy Barr, the national political reporter who keeps us up on all things that matter in today's debate. I'm going to start with you, Amy. When we just saw this first bite from Sarah Palin's interview last night, she's talking about her defense was defending those who were falsely accused. That's why she released that video in the wake of the shootings. Who was she talking about when she's saying the people who were falsely accused?
Well, she mentioned Rush Limbaugh, who the sheriff had come out and railed against immediately after this incident. Also Mark Levin and other conservative talk radio people, commentators, and the Tea Party movement. She referenced Tea Party patriots a number of times, and she also meant herself, because she had been very specifically talked about because of that target map of Sarah Palin's. And, clearly she was feeling very attacked by this, and she wanted to go and defend herself and vindicate herself.
Now, what was your assessment of some of the debate and the tone of some of the comments in the wake of the shooting? I mean, obviously, people did immediately say Jared Loughner was kind of reacting, in response to some of the comments that we heard on talk radio. I don't
Sure.
guess your name got in the mix, but
yeah, my name did get into the mix. Fortunately, there were a couple of things that I noticed immediately, which was that the media was so focused on the headline names, Congresswoman Giffords and the federal judge, and it took them a long time to name the other victims at the shooting, including those 6 people who lost their lives. So we saw that the media seemed to be preferring and privileging some of our citizens over others, depending on their title.
They're known to more people, so
that may be,
that would
but
make them.
The media wasn't even interviewing their families.
But do you think the media? Does Sarah Palin have a point?
I think indeed she does. And the other thing that I noticed was that the media was latching on to what it called this narrative of what may have inspired this shooter or set this person off, without just doing the basic investigation. Who is Jared Loughner? What was he influenced by? What did he write on the internet? And the more we found out about Jared Loughner, the clearer it became he was not inspired by politics whatsoever, that he was really a deranged person. And now we're learning that tends to be the case with people who go to political rallies to attack politicians.
Now, Andy, if we could bring you in here. Obviously, Palin waited, 4 days before she kind of had her response to some of the criticism in the wake of the shootings. What was your assessment of it? I've seen polls that a lot of Americans didn't think all that highly of it.
Well, first I wanted to get to some of the reporting of this. Is that there were undoubtedly mistakes made that weekend in the reporting of the story, but the public figures were named because you can name the public figures. The hospital has to release the names, and they have to get consent to do so. So that's why they weren't first reported. But in terms of polling, she's taking a hit. I think they don't deserve any sort of blame for this incident. It's clear that he was not motivated at all by her and may not even have heard of her or this map. But, I think they seriously bungled their response to this. And she wasn't quite right in the way she framed her response. They did have a statement on Saturday. They did have one of their aides do an interview. And then...
Whoa, let me stop you there, because obviously in that interview over the weekend, one of her aides said, look, those were not crosshairs on those maps. Those were, surveyor sites?
Right, and then last night she said they were crosshairs.
Right, and she said that that's not that original either. Democrats have used those. Does that just kind of add to this confusion or kind of further in people's minds their views? We've already decided, we've made up our mind on Sarah Palin.
It does, but I think this speaks more to them bungling the response than it does any actual responsibility she has. They've kind of been back and forth on what those symbols actually meant, and they're totally in the right that kind of analogy, those kind of symbols are used on all sides, and that's something that a lot of people are assessing in the wake of this. But you know, the narrative on this was starting to shift last week. It was starting, you know, there were those early and I think unfair stories, you know, pointing the finger at her, pointing the finger at Limbaugh and all the others when there was no proof of that. But then it was starting to shift, and people were saying like, well, you know, he's actually a registered independent. There's really no clear political motivation. And I think if she had been, you know, kind of stood up and was the bigger person, or just let this pass, she would have gotten out of this. But instead, she has this kind of, you know, video statement, which for 75% of it was perfectly on message and striking the right tone, and then she dips into this kind of bizarre statement and the blood libel thing, and that just redirected it in a very negative way for her.
Well, let's play another bite from her interview last night with Sean Hannity when she talks about why she decided to release that video.
I will continue to speak out. They're not going to shut me up. They're not going to shut you up, or Rush, or Mark Levin, or Tea Party patriots, or those who, as I say, respectfully and patriotically petition their government for change. They can't make us sit down and shut up. And if they ever were to succeed in doing that, then our republic will be destroyed. Not necessarily me being sat down and shut up, but having the voice of respectful dissent being shut up. That would destroy our republic.
Right.
Now, Amy, Andy was just talking about the tide was really starting to turn. I mean, you know, originally people kind of jumped in and said this is all about the rhetoric, you know, the very irresponsible, as it was characterized, rhetoric of people like Sarah Palin on the right and the crosshairs. But people were starting to take a breath. Then she came out with the video, and that stirred up things again. I mean, she's saying they're not going to shut me up, the media's not going to shut me up. But would she have been better off just to have shut up?
Well, I think that you're right in the sense that, you know, the narrative was shifting. We saw public polling that showed that the American people did not buy this idea that political rhetoric or the right, more specifically, was responsible for the, you know, the murderous acts of Jared Loughner. But I would have advised her to just sit and wait and watch the president's speech, and then if she wanted to offer a reaction, she could. And I think that we did see that the president's speech, that conservatives, many of them across the board, really appreciated what the president had to say.
Yeah, I think the polls showed 80% of the people were very supportive and supported his remarks.
Yes, and conservatives appreciated that he, too, said that Jared Loughner was not motivated or inspired by political rhetoric. But if this is an opportunity to have a more civil discourse, let's take it. But, you know, this morning I talked with Senator John Cornyn from Texas about all of this issue, and it seems the left and the media's obsession with Sarah Palin. And he agreed with that, and he said, but, you know, I don't think we should be so obsessed on one politician. Why are we here talking about Sarah Palin, whether she made a video or not, or if she tweets or she has a Facebook? No other politician seems to be such a lightning rod and of such interest to the press, more interest, I would argue, than Republicans. You've seen a lot of polling data. She's not even the front runner when it comes to 2012 presidential candidates.
Right, but I think, I mean, I don't think you would dispute that there's no question that the American people have an enormous fascination with her, and she's certainly been a player in national politics, and including in the recent midterm elections when her endorsements appeared to make a difference. Andy, do you think, I'm going to go back to you here, do you think that the media is unduly obsessed with Sarah Palin? I mean, she's saying she's not going to shut up. Do you think the media should just stop covering every breath that she seems to take?
I mean, there's no question that there is some serious overcoverage on some of the stuff that they do. But I mean, at the same time, like, they put themselves out there in such a way. I mean, like, they do the reality shows and all that stuff, and that exposes them to, like, kind of the gossip rag stuff. And then in terms of the politics, like, we're not going to stop covering the politics of her. I mean, her endorsement was the most sought. You know, the RNC or others moved heaven and earth to get her to do fundraisers for them. And even people who she's blown off, including, like, the NRCC, would love to have her come in. And until there's another Republican politician out there, even remotely like that, who, you know, not only has the fundraising support, but almost everyone in the party is afraid to say anything negative about her. Who else can you even say that about? You know, until she stops being that kind of political force, you know, I think all the kind of like obsessive coverage that we and others do of the politics of her and the huge footprint she's going to have in this 2012 race, whether she runs or not, I think is totally fair game.
Well, now, Amy also mentioned kind of we're talking about comparing her response to the president's. She talked about that too last night in her interview with Sean Hannity. Let's play that clip too, because she's a little critical of the president's response when he gave the speech at the University of Arizona. Let's take a listen to that.
Well, I thought that there were parts of it that really hit home, that all of us can hold on to and can live out. Obviously, I agree with those who have said that the setting was a bit bizarre. It was kind of like a pep rally, kind of like a campaign stop, and that was unfortunate because that really did, the setting, distract away from the message.
Now, obviously, this was an event organized by the University of Arizona. The president was invited to attend, so he didn't organize that. Is this, I'm going to tie together a few things here, because Andy had mentioned earlier that it seems like perhaps sometimes the response, they're bungling some of their responses, Sarah Palin's camp. And again, was this kind of an ill-advised statement to make? Would she have been better off just hitting the high road? He had nothing to do with the setting. Let's leave that aside.
Well, you know, timing is everything. And at the time of the president's address, a lot of people took note of the audience reaction, that it was jarring. That we're talking about 6 people whose lives have been taken, others who have been injured, and a congresswoman who is struggling in the hospital as we speak. And, you know, the T-shirts and, you know, all of that. John Podhoretz wrote a column for the New York Post talking about the inappropriateness of this. I think where Sarah Palin's getting the criticism is, here it is, Monday, you know, after the weekend, and she's still, you know, harping on that issue. I think that it would have served her better to simply look forward and move forward. And I think of Ronald Reagan and his, you know, the 11th commandment, speak no ill of other Republicans. The Republicans tend not to want to criticize one another because of that. But for Sarah Palin to take a page out of Ronald Reagan's handbook, you know, and she says that he's one of her political heroes, which is to be optimistic, forward-looking, taking the higher road, and not sort of wallowing in this victimology of what the media does to her. I think a lot of people.
You would characterize her response as perhaps wallowing.
Yes,
a little bit.
and watching the interview last night, I thought she had an opportunity to say, you know, she said this isn't about me, and yet so much of that interview was about Sarah Palin being attacked, or Sarah Palin and her comrades being attacked, instead of taking that moment to turn the conversation to, so what do we do next? What do we do to prevent another Jared Loughner? Clearly mental illness and guns is a very bad combination. Are there gun laws? Are there ways that we should be flagging people who everyone clearly finds threatening and dangerous, and to elevate the conversation beyond just, you know, sort of being in the trenches and having this sort of bunker mentality?
Andy, do you think that Sarah Palin in the interview last night misfired a little bit, missed an opportunity, as Amy suggests?
I think she absolutely did, and you're right. Hitting the president for that is just, I think, unwise in a lot of ways. I mean, it was among the most watched speeches. The viewership of that was just off the charts, and the reception was good. And in terms of the atmosphere, it's a college. You know, it's a basketball stadium, and they don't really choose that. It's the only place in Tucson where you could do something like that big. And so, like, what the students choose to do and all the rest of it. I mean, it's a grieving community. It's a small community. How they react is not really, you know, for the political betterment or anything of the president, and really has no control over that.
You know, one of the things that came up in the interview last night, and Hannity really pressed Palin on this, like everyone has. I mean, it's the big question, is she going to run for president? I think Amy has certainly suggested, and you have as well, that maybe she's not quite ready for prime time, or at least the Oval Office, based on the way she's responded to some of these things. What's your take on that big question? What are you hearing out there from your sources? What's the sense that you have right now? Does she have any idea if she's going to go that route, or is she just enjoying the spotlight right now?
Well, the honest truth is that her staff doesn't know. There are only 2 people who know, and it's her and Todd. And I mean, they're preparing right now as if they are, but they're only preparing as much as a group that small really can. I mean, they're limited in so many ways until they start building up an operation. And really, that's going to be the indicator that tells us if she's running or not. Right now, she's got about a half dozen people who run her whole show, and that's going to have to get multiplied over and over and over again if she even really wants to seriously explore a bid, just in terms of having the staff to staff an office in Des Moines and just take her around. And so that'll be the big tell. But for right now, there's really no clear indication one way or the other.
Amy, what's your sense? I mean, what would that do to the Republican Party?
I think that it would be extremely controversial and highly contentious if Sarah Palin were to run for the Republican nomination.
You mean within the party?
Within the party, and as I say,
we know what I think she would be covered, and certainly how the left would react.
Certainly, you know, the media would love for Sarah Palin to run. I mean, imagine how advertising would go up for the networks, and how many newspapers would fly off the newsstands if they could cover Sarah Palin every day in a presidential run. Her gaffes, her missteps, you know, the interview with Katie Couric. But among Republicans, I think it would be highly contentious. And, you know, as I said, polling data shows that other folks are ahead of her among Republican voters, primary voters. And so she, you know, it would be a battle. It would be a battle royale. I would like to see Sarah Palin, if she chooses to go that route, to get out of the us versus them. And either, you know, Sarah Palin versus what she calls the lamestream media. We saw during the 2008 campaign, small town America versus urban America. One of the things that voters want is someone who unites the country, that lifts us together, and someone who seems to have a broad respect for citizens of different ideological, economic, and social stripes. Right now, it seems that Sarah Palin is playing to a rather narrow base. We're seeing that in some of the polling data. And if she wants to get those independents, then I think she needs to broaden her appeal.
But, you know, I think most political analysts say that if the economy improves, Obama's almost a lock for 2012. I mean, would let's say it doesn't improve. Could Sarah Palin win?
Is there a path to the presidency? Boy, you know, we're 2 years out, and that's forever.
But that's
in
it's
politics.
starting.
I know, it's just starting. She's going to have to find out if she has the fundraising ability, if she has the infrastructure. You know, all of these things have to come into play, I think, you know, for her to make this decision. Or it could, who knows what Sarah Palin is thinking, but in order for her to be successful, you know, there are just some sort of basic practical things that she would have to line up.
Andy, final word. What do you think it'd do to the party, and is there any way that she could win the White House?
I don't know if there's a way that she can win the White House, but I mean, so much depends for her, if she's going to run, on what the rest of the field looked like. I mean, if Mike Huckabee's not in it, if Pence isn't in it, you know, if there's kind of like this opening where there's no social conservative to fill that void, and like, you know, let's say there's not really a candidate with a Tea Party mandate, you can see her stringing together a series of early states, Iowa, South Carolina, a lot of the states in the South encompass Super Tuesday, and then it's hard to say that she's not the nominee.
Well, it certainly will make your job fascinating as the national political reporter for Politico, Andy. So thanks a lot for your thoughts. And Amy, thanks so much for joining us. And that is it for Washington Unplugged today. I'm Jan Crawford. We will see you back here tomorrow on CBSNews.com. Have a good day.